All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are live for another episode of At Home with Mark. This is season 2, episode 6, and I am thrilled beyond belief to have Tim Marcus from Milkman on today. We're going to nerd out about amplifiers, and we were already nerding out about tremolo, so that might be another huge segment. But Tim, thanks so much for making the time, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. So I usually start these off by asking everybody, like I have a very specific moment in my childhood where I wanted to play music. Like I heard Nirvana's Nevermind and Pearl Jam's 10 in my buddy's room playing Sega Genesis and like dropped the controller and sat in front of the stereo and was like, I want to play guitar. Do you have a moment like that that led you down your path where you are now?
Oh, definitely. I grew up in like the 80s in Connecticut, and my friends and I would listen to like pretty bad like hair metal bands and stuff. And my uncle Jeff, who's like a total music guy, has a huge record collection. Was like, I don't know, I was probably like 11 or 12, and he was like, you should, your dad has a bunch of old records. You should go up there and try and find the Led Zeppelin records and listen to those. And I was like, okay. And then I like listened to Led Zeppelin. I just listened to them in order. I was just like, I don't know anything about this band. I'm 12. And I listened to Led Zeppelin 1, and I was just, my brain exploded. And I might have even been younger because I started playing guitar when I was 10, and I started learning Led Zeppelin songs that first year. So I think it had to be like maybe even like 8 or 9 years old.
Oh man.
And yeah, that like just exploded my brain open.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that kind of started me on the path. It was like, I want to play guitar.
Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of people, and I don't know if it's like I'll be 42 this year. I mean, it's like people in our demographic that really did seriously grow up like getting Zeppelin handed to them because of their like older uncles or aunts or whoever it may be. But
Yeah.
like a lot of people go back to that, and I don't think I got into Zeppelin until I got to high school, which is weird because well, maybe not, because like if I started really getting into music when the Seattle scene was popping, that led me down the path of like, oh, who did these guys listen to? And then
Yeah, do you remember the Columbia House like thing where you'd get like 10 tapes for like a penny or something? I got all that Seattle stuff then. I was, that had to be like, early 90s or something, and that's where I got like Pearl Jam 10 and Nevermind and all that stuff. And that was like, I was like, oh, I like this even more than Led Zeppelin. Like,
yeah, it's crazy. Like, have you stuck with some of those bands throughout the time? Like, as far as like them releasing records? Because like, I mean, I have a Pearl Jam sweatshirt on right now. Like, they're like one of my favorite bands. And their last record, I think, is great. I mean, there's a lot of people.
No, I haven't. I don't know why. I think the last Pearl Jam record I got was Versus. Was that one of theirs?
It's the second record, man.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
That's right. I was like, whoop, I'm out.
Yeah.
I got really into like listening when I was in high school and stuff. I was really into like jam bands and Frank Zappa and stuff like that. So I went a different direction.
Yeah, me too, man. I mean, when I was in high school, I have older siblings who were really into the Dead, and
oh yeah,
my older brother was into Fish. So by the time I was a junior in high school, I was working on stuff off Junta and whatnot. So I was doing the same path. Like, what stuff were you listening to, like, of the jam band stuff?
Well, Fish was a big one for me. And then since I was in New England, there was like a whole circuit of jam bands, like regional jam bands that I would go see. And my dad, again, with the records, the Dead, I always listened to as a kid, but I never really like saw them or associated them with anything until I moved here in San Francisco, where they're like, obviously huge, and the legacy and everything's here. Like the house is there in the Haight, and like a lot of the people that worked with them and stuff are still around the city. And now that I met more of those people, I've been listening to the Dead a lot more recently, and also because of the steel guitar stuff. Because Jerry played pedal steel. But yeah, I was into Fish. I was into this band called Mo. I like them a lot.
They're one of my favorite bands too, man.
Yeah. And then like Medeski Martin Wood, I was into those guys. I was into this band called The New Deal. I like those guys a lot. They didn't have a guitar player, but I like that stuff. What other stuff did I listen to back then? I don't know. But then I kind of got into like Wilco, like Summer Teeth came out, and it kind of like moved me back into more of like rootsy stuff. And I stopped listening to jam band stuff because I was like, these guys don't write very good songs. Like you listen to Summer Teeth and it's like the Beach Boys kind of influence and stuff. Like I got less into like the guitar noodle, more into the songwriting.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've gotten older, like I've been less into the guitar noodling and more into the songwriting. And it's also kind of followed my like guitar ability, you know,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like when I was like 20, I was like a shredder, and now I'm like a dad. You know, I do dad riffs.
Dad rock.
Yeah.
That's so funny, man. I feel like I think we're cut from the same cloth, Tim, because I had the same path, man. Like once you get into the weeds with the jam band stuff and you start to realize that most people are there for the lot scene and not there for the music, and you're like, oh, you know, all my friends are still like super into Fish, and I'm like, sweet, that's great. I'm glad you guys still love it. But then when I heard Wayne Krantz, I was like, whoa, this is like some serious guitar. Like this is beyond what I'm capable of even understanding right now. But Wilco was a huge, like when they put out, so that album, Summer Teeth, of course, like that's a huge favorite of mine. But like Sky Blue Sky, that record from
that's after my.
Oh, really?
It's like verses.
Dude.
Yeah. Like I listened to like Summer Teeth and Yankee Hotel Foxtrot and that kind of era. And then I kind of like migrated Pats, and I listen. I've seen Wilco since then, but I haven't really listened to the records since like the early 2000s for whatever reason.
You got to go back. If you haven't listened to that record, you got to listen to
I
that
need
one.
to because Nels is like one of my customers, like one of my guys, and that's his record. And pretty much where like he started with Wilco, and I'm terrible.
Oh man, it's so good. Were you into like at the time when you were flirting with the jam band stuff and like getting into other things? Like I've seen you post like stuff on Instagram and whatnot, listening to records, and it's like Weather Report or stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Like when did you get into that?
I brought my record player to my shop and like set it up last year, like during kind of like early pandemic, because I couldn't listen to like news and podcasts anymore, which is usually what I listen to all day. And I was just like, I'm just gonna like bring my old records and just listen to them all day. And I just kind of like rediscovered the like George Duke records and Weather Report and all that stuff. And yeah, that's what I was listening to when I was in like high school and college a lot.
Okay.
You know, just into like any kind of jammy thing and funky stuff. And I mean, that George Duke record that I posted about is the funkiest record you'll ever hear in your life. Like it's so good.
Yeah.
It's called Follow That Rainbow.
Oh yeah.
I recommend checking it out.
Yeah. I remember like the clip that you put, I was definitely like, stank face happened immediately.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what is this tempo? Like, where has this tempo been my whole life? You know? Yeah. And he has like the clavinet with the whammy bar on it, you know? Yeah. It's just so good.
Yeah. Is there a record that you can think of like that you love so much that you wish you could erase from your memory and like go back and listen to for the first time just to experience it again?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know if do you know who Jonathan Wilson is?
No.
He's like a Laurel Canyon guy, and he makes these amazing records. And like, you know, when I first heard that first album of his, it's called Gentle Spirit, and that would probably be one of them. But every time he releases a record, it's like I'm like, I'll get the vinyl and I'll be like, okay, I'm about to listen to my favorite record for the first time. Like when I put this on, you know, so like this is a special moment. So I like with him, I feel like I get to like experience that. And he's definitely like a shredder dude. Like he's a really good guitar player. And if you haven't heard those records, you should listen to them because they are real good. It's like your favorite record that you've heard for the first time. Like that's the experience.
That's awesome. That's how I feel about the Wood Brothers. Like,
oh yeah,
every record they put out, I'm like, they can do no wrong. Like,
yeah. When I've seen them before, and when I saw them, I was like, that's Chris Wood from Medeski Martin Wood. Like he had this brother the whole time.
I know.
Where was this guy in the 90s?
I know, dude. Jono Ricks, the drummer in the Wood Brothers, was on my show last season, and it's funny because when I was talking to him, I was like, dude, you don't understand. Like, you guys, I have 2 stickers on my car, and there's a Pearl Jam sticker and there's a Wood Brothers sticker. And, you know, I feel like everything you guys do, I just love. I'm just like ready for new music all the time from you guys. And he's like, dude, you don't have to like, the Wood Brothers were my favorite band too before I came in this band. Yeah. So he's like, I get it 100% because it's like, I I always thought when that band came out, I was like, oh no, what's gonna happen to Medeski, Martin, and Wood? Now I don't care at all. I'm just
Yeah.
like, you know, they're gonna be fine. Like the Wood brothers, there's something special about brothers singing together.
Yeah.
You know, it just is. There's something like
I
the
got to see them in a hotel room at the Folk Alliance in Memphis like a million years ago.
Oh wow.
And
That's cool.
Chris Wood actually was playing the upright bass and like broke a string, which like never happens. And then another like one of the artists at that festival like had a upright bass. She's like, "Oh, I have one down in my room." It was like the Folk Alliance, like everybody plays in hotel rooms at night. It's like this crazy thing that you would never do now because everyone would die from COVID. But
Right.
back then, you were like, "Sure, I'll pack 100 people into a hotel room with, 2 double beds." So like then they like passed this girl's bass like over the crowd and got it back to him. Like it was so good. It was like memorable experience.
Oh man. I'm ready for that to happen. I would be
Yeah.
there as soon as it's safe to do that. I would do that in a heartbeat. That
Yeah.
sounds amazing.
It's weird. You like think about in these times like the things that we did that were like totally normal, but like you would be like if that happened again now, you'd be like totally nervous. Like that's an anxiety dream. That's like a
Yeah, it's a nightmare. Let's be real. It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
So what of this music that you grew up listening to, I'm curious how your ears kind of got you to the point where you wanted to build something to create these sounds. Like were you always messing with stuff like growing up? Were you like messing with your own amps? And have you ever almost
kind
died?
of.
Have you ever almost killed yourself?
Oh
Like,
yeah,
when you first-
mostly. Yeah, well, lots of times. I mean, I was kind of playing around with electronics, and I got this job after college where I was repairing like stereos and TVs and stuff, and that almost killed me. Like TVs will give you a shock that you'll never, it's like a lightning bolt, like 60,000 volts. That'll get you. So yeah, that has almost killed me a couple times. And then amps, when I get a shock from an amp, I'm like, ow. That's not as bad as the TV though.
That's so funny.
Yeah, you only do that kind of stuff when you're moving fast and being sloppy and trying, doing too much at once. Like if you're like kind of paying attention to what you're doing, like you don't really get a shock. But when you're a kid and you're messing around with stuff, like for sure, you blow stuff up and let the smoke out of things. And I didn't really have tube amps until I was in college, and I didn't really know anything about them, which was kind of weird. Like so I had this job in Vermont at this place recycling electronics, and I met a guy who was like a tube amp guy, and he just came in and was like, "Hey, if you have any tube stuff here, like, give it to me." Because he knew that I didn't know anything about it.
Right.
And then, but I was like, okay, like I'll give it to you, but you have to teach me how it all works and stuff. And so, but then I still didn't really like get into it too much. It was only really when I started playing pedal steel, and I was like, there's no like boutique tube steel guitar amp out there. Like I want to have like this ridiculous steel guitar amp. So that's kind of where I got into it. And that was about 10 years ago.
Oh, wow. So, I mean, that's not too long ago.
Yeah.
How
not
old
that long ago.
How old is the company again? Is it about 10 years? Or?
It's about 10 years.
Yeah, I thought it was around that, but I didn't know for sure. I was like, is there, because sometimes you talk to people like Josh from JHS, like how he was doing stuff way before JHS was a thing. So I'm like,
and I kind of was too. I built some like stuff for myself, but not, and like pedals for friends, and nothing like that should see the light of day.
Well, everybody's got to cut their teeth, man. I mean, as a songwriter, it's like everything that you hear people say is like, songs have to be manure. You got to write a bunch of shit before.
Yeah, you don't want to hear the songs you wrote in middle school or whatever.
No.
Like, thank God we're not building a spaceship,
Yeah. What was your first guitar rig?
My first guitar rig, let's see. Well, I mean, when I was 11, I think, my cousin who was in like punk bands and stuff like gave me basically like whatever, or sold it to my dad, maybe just whatever like he had. And it was a Washburn GB2, which had like a 3/4 scale neck. And it was a Marshall like mini bass stack thing, which I think they still make.
I think I remember what you're talking about.
Yeah, solid state like thing. And then I had a Rat pedal and a Boss like DD something digital delay that I didn't know what it was because it said feedback on it, and I thought it was like, oh, feedback, like cool, like guitar feedback, and it's like, nope, that's not what this does. But then I figured out like, oh, when you solo and you turn this thing on, it sounds cool.
Yeah.
So
I don't understand delay. And I've said this a million times. I really want to be into delay, but every time I buy one, Tim, I sell it. I just like.
oh really?
I don't
I'm
know
the
what it
complete
is.
opposite. That's the only pedals I have. I have
Really
boxes and boxes of delay pedals. Whenever someone releases one, I buy it, and I have tape delays, and I have like whatever else. Like, yeah,
okay.
I love it.
I don't understand like why I keep doing it. I think what I really need is just a really decent slapback because that's what I
Yeah,
like.
you get that the one that I did with Josh Scott. That's where
Simple.
I ended up too. I'm like, I don't want all the other stuff. I just need it to be a slapback so it sounds like rock and roll.
Right. Yeah.
And nothing else. Because like on most delay pedals, you like, you're turning the knob and the slap is like, oh, missed it. Oh, like there it is. And because you have this whole range from like, milliseconds to like seconds on the knob. So
what's the most simple delay pedal for like a person like me that doesn't really love all the bells and whistles? Like what would be one that you'd be like, dude, I think you would like this if you got this?
My favorite delay pedal of all time is the Ibanez AD99.
Everybody says that.
It's like a big honking thing with 3 knobs, and like you can turn the like feedback all the way up, but it doesn't like regenerate, which is why people probably don't like it. But I like it because it just means that you like can't screw it up really.
Okay.
Like wherever the knobs are set, you turn it on and it sounds good.
Okay.
It's just big and they're weird looking, and I don't know. I rarely see people that have them, but everybody I know who has, like, I brought one to Josh, and he's like, "I've never seen this before." I was like,
really?
"What?" Yeah,
he's like the guru, man.
I know. Well, I'm sure he has like all of them now, but at the time he didn't have any.
Yeah, man. I think Zach from Mythos Pedals is making something because like that, like the pedal you were talking about, because I think that's one of his favorites. And he's been working on this delay pedal, but I think when he was originally going to put it out, he made it sound like it was too complicated. And he was like, no, I need to like make it simple. And I'm pretty sure that's the circuit-esque that he's going for on it.
3 knobs. Like how delay is it? And then how many times does it come back?
Yeah.
And then and when you turn it all the way up, it's like, it's still not that many times.
Yeah.
So it still kind of disappears behind what you're doing.
Which is what I probably would like. But yeah, it's weird, man. I mean, I have drawers full of overdrive pedals like every guitar player, but it's like,
see, I'm kind of the opposite. I never find an overdrive like that I like. Like I have tons of those too, and like I'm always like, well, this one kind of does this well, and there's like 2 that I use pretty much all the time that are like, that's the JHS Morning Glory and the Greer Lightspeed. And every time people ask me for a recommendation, I'm like, just get one of these 2 because that's what I use. And I don't know, they sound the most like an amp getting cranked up.
Yeah. The one that's blown my mind in the past year is the Cornerstone stuff, like the Gladio. And he just put out the new Gladio single channel, like SC.
Okay.
And that thing for low gain overdrive, pushing the amp, because it's kind of going for that Robin Ford sound. Like, people think it's like supposed to be a Dumble in a box, but it's not that. It's like Emilio was hearing, like trying to get that Robin Ford creaminess, and it does it really well. And the new one's really cool too because it has a clean blend, so you can blend it. Woo, it's nice, man. That's
really, like what the Klon does. It like splits it into like a side chain or something.
Yeah, it's really, really nice.
Although I do have a Klon KTR, and I had to say that is a great like pedal.
And I've heard it sounds
there is that one too, but I just never use it. Because I'm always like, I know I can do what I need to do with a JHS pedal or the Greer, so I just stick with those. Super boring.
Well, no, those are like classics, and the Lightspeed seems to be like a sleeper. It's just like not a ton of people use it, but the people that do use it are in the know. So
it's I think it's kind of like ubiquitous at this point, like the Lightspeed. I mean, last time I saw Nick, he's like, yeah, every day my guys come in and they each build like 25 of them or something.
Yeah, I don't doubt it.
Every single day.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. He's got something special there for sure. And all his stuff just seems like it's really curated by him and like creating something that he wants someone to like really love using. It's
Yeah.
not just like gear. It's like a couch that you sit in, you know,
He was
every
like
time.
one of my early like amp friends. Like when I first started out, like him and I don't remember how we even met. Oh, you know how we met is because I played a gig at the Red Clay Theater in Georgia, and the guy who in the opening band had this like purple amp and it said Greer on it, and I was like kind of checking it out, and it had Mercury transformers in it, and I was like, oh, like this guy knows what he's doing. So I like somehow like through Facebook or whatever, like found him and became friends with him, and that was pretty early on. And he's like, "Oh, let me send you this pedal I made called the Lightspeed. Like, I think you'll like it." And I was like, "Oh my god! Like this is what like a overdrive pedal can be." Like, I've only had like I'm used to like my tube screamers and whatever stuff from the '90s, and that him sending me that pedal like spawned like an enormous collection of boutique pedals and whatever that. So
That's great. Was there any other relationships like that while you were starting to kind of, jump into the industry that like you found to be
yeah,
super helpful?
well, Chris Benson and I met like pretty early on, for both of us. Like we did this event down at Taylor Guitars, and there was like a whole bunch of companies that like were people, but they're all like one man companies that we met. Like Joel Cordy was there, and um, who else was there? Some random people that were kind of Ian Anderson was there. This guy named Dan Tyak who used to make salvage pedal boards, kind of put the thing together. Ryan and the dudes from 60 Cycle Hum were there.
Nice.
This guy John, who I've done a ton of projects with, was there, and I'm not going to name everyone that was there because there's a lot of people. But Bad Cat, John Thompson was there. Like so, anyways, like Chris and I kind of met there, and like we've just kind of become bros, even though we're like we're technically the competition, I guess. But
Yeah, I mean,
his stuff is just so good. I'm like, you're the only other guy who's like stuff is really good. Like if people don't want to buy my amp, like because there's lots of ego in the amp business, and I'm like, there's lots of people who like say their stuff's good, and like his like Benson stuff is like legitimately good, like very very good. From one amp builder to another, like that. Sometimes I see him do stuff and I'm like, oh man, like I should have thought of that.
Like, that's great. Well, that's good though. That keeps you on your toes, man. That's fine.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with some friendly.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, it's great because now I'm like, we're pretty close, and I'll be like, is this gonna work? And he's like, no, I tried that. Smoke comes out, whatever, that kind of stuff.
Well, that new like germanium fuzz that they just released or whatever, that thing looks crazy. The self-regulating temperature, like. Have you played? Did you get to play through one of those before it popped?
No. He was supposed to send me one a long time ago.
That thing looks
but
dope.
I have not received it yet. Chris, if you're watching this.
It looks awesome.
Yeah, but he explained the whole thing to me like maybe like a year ago, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, that's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then he bought like an incubator, and he was like incubating his germanium transistors like like newborn babies,
That's crazy
to like figure out the temperature and all that stuff. Like, yeah, he put a lot into that. So
yeah, I need to check it out. I love fuzz, man. Are you a fuzz guy too?
Yeah, because with the steel guitar, like fuzz is the sound.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that.
Like, yeah, listen to all like the old like Flying Burrito brothers and anything with like Sneaky Pete and whatever. Like he was like a fuzz guy like early on in the like late 60s, early 70s.
I did not know that. That's crazy. So like what kind of stuff were they using back then? Like
probably the
tone benders and stuff?
Yeah, there's like the Jordan buzz tone in the thing that like plugs into the side of the steel guitar. A lot of those early I don't know, Josh always talks about them, like the little like weird things that have the plug built in that plug into the guitar. Like those are actually, a lot of them I think were meant for steel guitar and lap steel.
Interesting.
It makes more sense, at least to me, it makes more sense to like plug that into the side of your pedal steel, and your controls are like right there by your finger, to tweak.
That's really interesting, man.
So there's a guy named Chris Mahoney, who like made a newer version of the Boss Tone the Buzz Tone called the Boss Tone, or maybe it's the other way around. And that was like the first like fuzz I started using with pedal steel, and I was like, oh, I can totally get the like Sneaky Pete sounds with this thing.
That's dope. We had a question pop in. Maybe you know the answer to this.
Rusty Young probably used fuzz. He used everything. He would crank Marshall stacks up as loud as they could go.
That's through a pedal steel?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Dude.
Like,
I gotta look into
trying to find some so I like weirdly met the engineer from Legends, that Poco record, which has a song on it where he uses like a Leslie speaker. And he said that in the room that was so loud that he wouldn't, the engineer like wouldn't go into the live room when they were tracking that, because it was like multiple Leslie speakers turned up as loud as they could go with like Marshall stacks. And
what?
Yeah.
Dude, I had no clue. I mean, I don't know much about pedal steel, to be honest. I have to be completely transparent about that, because I mean, my experience is like Robert Randolph, you know, and like Sacred Steel stuff, because I play slide.
Because you're a child of like 90s jam bands. You would probably love all that. Like Poco is basically like a jam band from like, you know, they're like the dudes from Buffalo Springfield. And they like jam, and the steel guitar player is like right there with the guitar player. And it's like sometimes you can't even tell who's who.
Okay.
It's good.
Okay. Walter's saying the first album, get it.
Yeah. The first couple.
Okay.
And they got in the 80s, they, you know, they did the 80s thing that everybody did, but
I don't think anybody could avoid that at the time. Did anyone avoid the 80s? Like any musician?
Jimi Hendrix.
Well,
thank
God. Well, it's interesting, like, because once we got into the 90s, because 91 I think was the year 10 came out, kind of thing. So that's like the Nirvana, Pearl Jam, the tides were turning at that point, I guess, a little bit. And MTV had to like, oh no, what are we gonna do now, kind of thing. But I need to check some of this stuff. I need some new music, man. Like I need some, and especially being a slide player, I think listening to pedal steel stuff will give me a lot of cool ideas as well.
Yeah. Well, everything you need to know about how good Sneaky Pete is, there's a Frank Zappa album called Waka Jawaka. And I think that's the album. And there's a song on there called It Might Just Be a One-Shot Deal. And Sneaky Pete takes the most ridiculous pedal steel solo you'll ever hear in your life. And it's like everyone else that plays with Frank Zappa. And I remember hearing that, and like I didn't even know what it was. I was like, "How the fuck is this guy?" Excuse me, I don't know if we can swear. I was like, "How's this guy playing guitar like that?" I was like, I couldn't figure it out until years later, and I realized who it was, and I was like, "Oh." So
Sneaky Pete and Poco. I will check that out.
But then his stuff that he was doing with the Flying Burrito Brothers and stuff. I mean, he was just a killer. And this is in like the late '60s.
Man,
like.
How hip is that?
I know. And he was using like a tape delay and fuzz and like with steel guitar, like so good.
That's crazy. That's like almost like, you know, drawing a parallel to like Miles using a wah pedal kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, because who would think of that? It's so forward thinking. Like in terms of the music industry, like first of all, to have a pedal steel on a record at that time in the rock era, like
I know it's like a brand new instrument back then too. That it wasn't even around that long.
When did that album, or when did that instrument, when did that get invented? Like,
there's lots of different stories about it, but somewhere probably like, you know, between the late 50s and like mid 60s, maybe.
Man,
like because the lap steel had been around for a long time, and like the Nashville like session tweaker dudes would like start adding like foot pedals to it, basically. But then some of the first steel guitar stuff I think came out of like LA with Ralph Mooney.
Okay.
And that was like early 60s.
Man.
And
what was who had the like patent on that? Like who
I have no idea. I mean, these guys would like build their own instruments, a lot of them.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Man. Well, speaking of building things, I really want to get into your amps and talk to you about, so here's my little brief history of one vintage amp that I owned. Was a 71 twin reverb Silverface.
Great. We've all owned one.
Yeah. And
master volume.
Yeah, and I got it for free because my friend's dad had a warehouse and it was sitting there and it didn't work, and he was like, "Do you want it?" And I was like, "Sure." And it turned out it was just a fuse. So
oh wow. Yeah,
so just got that. It was immaculate, man. It was it was a great amp, and I was gigging around Boston when I was going to Berkeley with that amp, and like I just was running it on 2 power tubes so I could turn it up a bit. And it sounded great. And I got some great tones out of it, but like, you know, it conked out a couple times.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, like I wish I just had like a more reliable version of this. So it's like, is that the scope these days with like boutique builders like you and like Headstrong and like some of these other amp companies? Do you feel like you're doing your own thing, but you're trying to like stay true to, you know, classic circuits that musicians like myself don't have to be worried about breaking down on the road? Is that like the main focus?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's that like there is the like hindsight where like you've seen how these amps break over time and you can kind of like build yours to avoid it. But I mean, when it comes to tubes, there's really no, I mean, it's like a light bulb, like it's gonna go out. It's always gonna go out when you need, you know, when you turn the light on, you need to find something. It's always when the bulb burns out. So with tube amps, you kind of like just gotta have that um as a background thing. But as far as the like construction and stuff, like the way those 70s amps were constructed by Fender was onto a piece of like fiberboard, and you're living in Boston, so you have like a hot summer and then you have a cold winter, and the fiberboard's like whoa, like getting all wavy, and it's literally like those amps would start failing, and you'd hear the like crackling thunderstorm sound probably, and that's the sound of a carbon composition resistor being like pulled in half by flexing pieces of cardboard, which are so I had an old 70 something twin, which is like the first amp I had for my pedal steel, and it was awesome, but it like always had the problems. And where's my thing back here? This is the tool that you need. It's a chopstick. To fix those amps, you just poke, you're like, oh, it's that spot, and you don't electrocute yourself.
Yeah,
so,
that's great.
Yeah, so I was like, kind of when I started building stuff, I would like kind of be like, well, what went wrong on my amp that I didn't like? Like, usually half the time it was the weight. Like, I really didn't like those amps, and really you can cut like maybe 10 pounds off the thing if you just put it into a pine cabinet. Because like all the really old Fender amps from like the 50s and 60s are in pine or redwood, and the later stuff is in plywood, which weighs like a ton just on its own. So I started by like kind of making things that were like my twin, but lighter, and then I started like, you know, playing around with it and getting different building techniques, and I ended up using these turret boards like this because like they have like a tiny bit of flex, but they absorb no moisture whatsoever. Like they usually used to make like sailboats and stuff, just fiberglass, and these turrets. Fender used the paper and the eyelets, and they're great for a certain number of years, and then not so good.
Yeah.
And then the other thing about those vintage amps is the just like the quality of electronics back then was like not very good. They didn't have the benefit of computers, lasers, modern industry. Aluminum barely existed back then. All my amps have an aluminum chassis, and like that alone makes like a huge difference. It makes it quieter, it makes it sound better. So really it's just like maybe not necessarily intentionally like trying to improve on the old things. It's just kind of like we live in a better manufacturing time for that kind of stuff. And then there's also this kind of like boutique thing where companies are like hand making capacitors again, and a lot of things like that, where like the Jupiter stuff that I use. So Fender never really like those amps were actually, they're made of like stuff that people go crazy for now, like those blue molded caps and Allen Bradley resistors and things that are like, you know, wow. But like really it was just the crap back then. It was just junk. It was the cheapest stuff they could find. Like now, like you have to pay extra to get that kind of stuff because they don't make it anymore. But it was like the first thing the industry phased out when they could. They're like, we're gonna get these terrible carbon resistors like out of our lives. This is in like the 70s, you know.
Right.
So now it's like all the audiophile stuff is like, you know, probably like metal film and all these other things that don't sound good in guitar amps, and but are technically more reliable. So
Are
But
you?
anyways, I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
no, no.
rambling down a road of.
No, that's cool. No, it's interesting. So are you like stoked on like newer products and
Oh
newer?
yeah,
Okay, so like you're like, forget about the old stuff. The new stuff's great, kind of thing. Like using these
yes.
new components. Okay.
Save
Yeah.
your money for a vintage guitar. That's my advice. Vintage guitars are made out of trees that were hundreds of years old, and new guitars are made out of trees that are like 5, 10 years old. Like the quality of the wood. Some boutique builder, obviously, different story.
Mm-hmm.
But a vintage amp is made out of old parts that like have just don't stack up against the modern equivalents.
Mm.
And in every way. So
Yeah.
a lot of people like dislike this opinion that I have, but it's just based on my experience. Like vintage guitars, awesome. They sound great. The new ones don't sound as good.
Mm-hmm.
Old amps sound like a nightmare for any technically, or unless you have a good relationship with the tech and
Mm-hmm.
money to burn.
I
But
don't.
like
I
your
don't.
old twin, like there's just the things are just going to keep. It's like an old car. It's like things are going to keep coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want it to be a daily driver, like you got to invest a lot into it. If you want to just have a new car that works and has like a powertrain warranty or whatever, then you get a new one.
Yeah.
And the AC, and you turn the AC on, you're like, oh, the AC works. And you turn the heat on, you're like, oh, my feet feel like nice and toasty. Whereas like the amp equivalent of that, you turn the AC on and the knob would be like, I'm holding the knob of the air conditioner now, and I'm hot.
Yeah, man, it's funny because the Two Rock that I bought the first time I plugged into it, I just bought it sight unseen. I was just like, I want to get. I bought the Studio Signature, the head and cab, and I was like, I'm sure it's gonna be great. And the first time I plugged it in, I was like, wow, this is like HD guitar kind of
Yeah.
thing. Like it's totally different, like from any other amp that I've owned. The red one that's behind me there is like my buddy Steve has a company called Synaptic Amps, and he's actually in New Hampshire.
Okay.
Or no, Maine. He's in Brunswick. Is it Brunswick, Maine? Yeah. So he's up there. But when I was at school, I got to know him, and he builds them, and that thing's dope too. He like, it's Class A, point to point, like everything. He does everything himself, and sounds fantastic. And when I plugged into that Two Rock, I was like, holy crap! Like I feel like, it's like the 29 pedals Una. I just got that this past year. And it's supposed to be like you plug into it. It's like you're using like an inch long cable, like right into your amp kind of thing. So it's like no tone suck. But I felt that way just plugging right into the Two Rock. I was like, wow. And that's like the difference. Like that's the main difference between buying something that's reliable and like a good company that's like sourcing good parts like you and everything. So your cabinets, are you doing all pine cabinets?
Yeah, my cabinets are like the ones that are wrapped in Tolex and tweed and stuff. Those are pine,
Okay.
solid pine.
And are you guys making those in house? Are you guys doing all that? Okay. Okay.
No. See all my fingers? they're attached to my hand. Like I am afraid of spinning blades and stuff as a guitar player. Like
I know. Me too. Me too.
Yeah, I did some where I like, because I was like, I gotta learn just to wrap Tolex and stuff, just just in case like I need to know that. So I kind of learned that and did that a few times, and I was like, nah, like this is just too much. The people that are good at it, like a proper like upholsterer, does it in like no time, and it looks perfect. Like when I do it, it takes me like a whole Saturday, and I'm like got band-aids all over my hands, and I'm like,
yeah, don't do that. Don't do that, Tim. Keep making cool amps,
focus.
Man.
I learned kind of early on to like kind of focus my attention and time on the things that are like important, like building the amps and the circuits and making sure everything's good.
Yeah.
And like being in touch with people, like contacting people, because that's like a big thing. It's like when someone writes to you, like you got to write them back. And it takes a lot of time. That's like probably half of what I do is like corresponding with people.
Yeah.
So yeah, wrapping Tolex and building cabinets. Plus it's messy, and for until recently, like there was just no room in my shop for anything like that. Like I started doing it in my bedroom, and then I moved to like the other bedroom in the house, and then I moved to like a shop that was the size of my bedroom, and then I moved to a shop that was like incrementally larger than my bedroom, and then I moved into another one that was like pretty big, and then now I'm in like a proper shop where it's like I actually have like a roll up door and a warehouse and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So I'm
talk about
finally in a
that.
space.
Talk about that, because you just recently did that within the past month or two, right?
Yeah, I moved in right at the beginning of the year.
Okay. And then everything's going well?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, one of the things that Bob Taylor told us in that thing we did with him was like, small shop. He's like, you want to have a small space. And like, I definitely like not intentionally like took that to heart. And like, this space is still pretty small. I mean, it's just under 1,200 square feet, which seems big, but it's actually like once we got everything in here and piled it all in and set it up, it was like, it feels pretty cozy still.
You
But
said you had an interesting thing happen when you moved in.
oh yeah, I was immediately burglarized. Like someone must have been watching us like loading stuff in here, guitars, and yeah, it was like early on before I'd even like set up any security, anything. I just like they just got me and took all my camera stuff, which is like not super critical for running the business, so it didn't really affect anything like that, but it's definitely like my like taking photos of my amps and the process and stuff is like really important to me. So I was like, so for like weeks, I was just like dealing with that. And there's actually a guy who was just here, who just left a minute ago, who's fixing that window, like adding a bunch of glass bricks and concrete so that it's no longer a option for people to come in.
Good. Yeah, we need you on your toes making amps, man.
Yeah.
So of all the lines, so we were talking before, and I was telling you how I was like been eyeing your stuff for a while, and I want to get like a Princeton-esque wattage level, and we were talking about harmonic tremolo. I want to ask you about the amp though.
Oh yeah.
Because in a world of like digital modeling and all this stuff, like what brought that products into your mind? Like, how did that spawn?
That one. So I had this amp that I was making for steel guitar players called the Half and Half, which was had a tube preamp. It's basically like the front end of a twin with a tube reverb and everything, and it went into like this Class D power amp. And I still make them for steel guitar players. Like, and I have a bass version too for bass players. It's 700 watts. And it's basically the idea is like you kind of hand wire. Do I have one here? Yeah, I have a chassis right here. Here's a bass amp. Well, basically the idea is like you kind of hand wire the tube part, and then you have like a Class D amp, which is not installed in this one, but so that you get the kind of like mojo of a hand wired amp through like something with more modern power. And so I was building those for years. And then John, the guy I was talking to, who I'd met at the Taylor thing, like I was kind of working with him on them. And then I saw like this company that makes the power amps like came out with like a new smaller one. And I was like, oh, like maybe we could do that in like a pedal, just kind of naively thinking like this is a thing that'll be easy to do. And then he and I like spent the better part of like maybe 18 months like figuring out how to get it to be like the perfect thing that it is, and also like an assist from Robert Keeley with the reverb. And yeah, I mean, that basically was like it's the same kind of idea as the Half and Half stuff, but just in the pedal form. And it is like a marvel of like power supply engineering that John like should probably get some sort of award. I don't know who it's gonna give it to him, but to like run everything off of the like power supply and have it work and be quiet and whatever. Like it was, yeah, that product. Like I learned like more about everything in the world like of electronics and manufacturing than I'd like ever known before, because I'd never like tried to mass produce anything. So yeah, but anyways, that's how that came about. And that was like simultaneously like the greatest and worst thing I've ever done.
It seems like the best, like because every year when NAMM happens, I watch all the Premier Guitar videos and stuff because I'm a gear nerd. I'm always gassing, man. But when I saw that, I was like, that seems like the best desktop amp to like do quick session work, or like, you know, I do gear demos for my channel too. So like, running other
Thank
pedals.
you. That's the Mason taking off.
Nice. Running like pedals into it too, like to get sounds and do it quietly when my kid's sleeping and my wife's sleeping right above me. You know what I mean? Like that seems like such a win for you guys.
Yeah. So I mean, that was just kind of like, I mean, obviously we didn't like plan to have a pandemic after we released this product, but like, yeah, there's so many people that are like, oh, thank you, my kid, you know, I'm stuck at home all day and my kids and whatever. And like, totally same for me. Like my son is sleeping in one room and I'm like practicing pedal steel with the amp pedal and the headphones on. And, you know, it had the thing about the amp pedal that like, for me at least, that makes it kind of special is that it has like a feel to it, which is like a hard thing to describe, that the digital modeling stuff that I've used, at least, like there's no feel whatsoever. You have to like kind of add it with like a compressor or something.
Right.
It doesn't like an amp with a like, you know, hand built power supply and stuff in it, like a tube amp, like has like a thing that it does. And I think most guitar players would know what that is, where you like play hard and the amp's like, not so much, you know, it like kind of pulls back.
Yeah.
And you play light and the amp's like, ooh, like here's all this like sparkly detail stuff. Like, and the amp pedal does that too. And you know, it's just like this weird thing. So like, it just, it's like very real and like easy to connect with it. Yeah. And it's been like a total lifesaver for me during this whole like at home period, because like, I don't know what else I really would have like done for practicing besides like, you know, playing into the Apollo or something.
Right. And there's 2 versions of it, right? There's 2 versions of the amp. Okay.
Yeah. Last year we came out with the 100-watt version.
Yeah. That's cool. I mean, it's in such a tiny thing, like footprint too.
Yeah. They're pretty, everyone thinks they're bigger than they are like in real life. Because when I first came out with it, I ordered like the wrong knob size. So it had these like tiny little knobs on it. And I was like, well, it's NAMM's tomorrow, so I guess this is what we got. Everyone's like, this thing looks huge. And then like when they actually saw it, they're like, oh, it's actually not that big.
Yeah.
So
it's like getting your haircut when your hair is in the in-between phase. Like, don't worry, they're gonna grow. It'll come back. Yeah. It's gonna be fine.
Yeah, this is a conversation I have with my wife every time I get my haircut because I have curly hair. Like, you got to give it 2 weeks, you know?
It'll be all right.
It looks terrible now, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's that product is so cool, man. But I wanted to talk to you because we were talking before this about Harmonic Tremolo, and you were like, I think you should get the creamer. And I was like, well, the 15, I like how it has Harmonic Tremolo. And you're like, yeah, well, maybe you would like it. But so talk a little bit about like what we were talking about, because sometimes I think there's a lot of people who kind of know what Harmonic Tremolo is and, you know their swampy standard tremolo stuff. But like what I like about it is kind of like a univibe. It has that like, I like stuff that really
cheesy thing.
Yeah,
chewy is the word.
Yeah, I love it when you feel like it's like molasses in your mouth kind of thing. Like, talk about how you do it.
Well, I've always like been really focused on tremolo, like since the beginning. Like, because the first thing was when I did the creamer, which is the second model I made. And I was still pretty like new to the world of, you know, everything amp. I was trying to figure out how to do like a Princeton, but like without the like a Princeton has like a fixed bias circuit, and we wanted to do it with the cathode bias circuit, which is what a Tweed Deluxe has. And like me and my friend Max were like trying to figure it out, and which I did eventually figure it out. And the creamer has awesome tremolo now with the cathode bias, but I learned like a lot about it. And then like after like Max and I did that, he's like, oh well, now that you got that tremolo, you got to kind of you got to check out this tremolo. And he brought his old 61 Super over with 210s, and he like carried it over like from his apartment. Like he carried it so far. It's such a heavy amp. So
I was gonna say that's an old amp. I'm sure it's heavy.
Yeah, 210s, like that thing weighed 1,000,000 pounds. He carried it all the way up to my place, and we just kind of like started like figuring out like what was going on with it. Like, you know, that scene in Zoolander where they're like trying to get the files out of the computer. Like that was like me and him for a while. And then I built like a bunch of different versions of that tremolo, kind of copying the Fender circuit, and it just like doesn't work all the time. It doesn't really work that well. And I bought a couple of those Fender amps. I have a 61 Pro and a Bandmaster, and they both have that tremolo, and they both sound like completely different, and they sound different than his Super did, and it's just like a super tweaky circuit that I and then would spend maybe like another 3 or 4 years kind of like dialing it in and figuring out like a lot of stuff that Fender did that didn't like need to be there, in my opinion. Um, so I really just kind of like gutted it and figured it out and spent forever and got it to get the maximum chewiness out of it.
Nice.
Which is, and then the whole thing was I wanted to build an amp that's the size of a Princeton that had that tremolo in it.
Is that tough because of the real estate?
Yeah, the real estate is a problem, and yeah, it took a long time. It took me probably between the time that he brought the Super over and we fell in love with that tremolo, and me having an amp that was the size of a Princeton that had that tremolo in it with reverb, was 6 years maybe of like nonstop, like every couple of weekends being like, okay, like I'm gonna try this. But yeah, then I figured it out. And then a customer asked me if I could put that into like a unit with reverb, like just like the old Fender reverbs. And I was like, oh, those, there's companies that make those and there's a kit and whatever. And he's like, no, but I want your harmonic tremolo in there. So I was like, okay, fine, I'll try it. And then I've been doing that, and like I don't know. It's like just been a thing. Like people just are like, oh, I want one of those. I'm like, okay. Like I think it's because Josh Scott talked about it and did it on his show. And then it was just like everyone was like, yes. And I was like, cool, thanks, Josh. I guess I make these now.
Yeah. Well,
but I just take the same tremolo circuit from that HD15, and like once I've kind of like dialed it in, I can kind of like do things with it. But I still haven't really figured out how to make it work in a 40-watt amp. That's the next. That's the next frontier, because it's just a weird little thing I got going on with that circuit. It's very unique.
Yeah. Why did, when Fender put out the Super, that brown face era, was the reason they didn't have reverb in that amp is just because of the real estate? Like they couldn't figure out how to get it all in there?
I don't know what the exact reason was, but my thinking is that they hadn't invented it yet.
No.
Because the first amp that had reverb, I think, was the Vibraverb, which is around that same time, and it had totally different tremolo. I think they were going more for vibrato or something, or rotary sound than reverb.
Right. Okay.
So like Tweed amps had tremolo, and early Brown amps had these various tremolos in those amps. Like, but they didn't do reverb until the Vibraverb, and then they decided, oh, let's just do reverb, and then that's when things went like tremolo wise for Fender. Like the tremolo and the Supers and whatever that era, and the Vibraverb is amazing. It's like the best tremolo ever. And then they started doing that like Lightbug photocell tremolo. It's just so bad. Like you can't. It's the most unmusical tremolo that Fender ever made. Man. And like there's so many other tremolos out there in other amp companies that are so much better, like Magnatone and whatever. And like why Fender built gazillions of amps still to this day. They're still building amps with that tremolo circuit, and it's like it's choppy, it's weird. Yeah. It's cool for like a Quentin Tarantino soundtrack thing.
Yep.
But it's not as good as what they had going on in the 60s.
Yeah. Well, what you're doing is pretty magical from what I've heard. Just from friends and people who played through your stuff, and just from videos that I watched. It just seems like you have that dialed in terms of like being authentic with it, the way it's supposed to be done, from what I can tell. So
I just am like, it's like when you cook at home, you just like, you make what you like to eat. That's it's the same philosophy. I think it's just like, I want to use these things.
There's plenty of like-minded people like me, man. I mean, I have a good relationship with Magnatone. They just sent me an amp to demo for my channel, and I did a couple videos and sent it back. And they sent me a Varsity Reverb first, And I was like, holy crap.
That has a harmonic tremolo in it, doesn't it?
No, it's just
Which
regular
one of theirs does? Oh, the Daylighter or Twilighter or something
Twilighter.
lighter.
I think they're sending me that next because he was like, I want you to hear how amazing the tremolo is on that. So
that might be the one, yeah.
Yeah, I think they're gonna send.
I didn't know that anyone else had done one with reverb, and I like posted something on Instagram. So I was like, "Oh, there's a Magnetone amp that has that." I was like, "What?"
Yeah,
so,
man,
good. I mean, the more people that get the harmonic tremolo, the better. You know, like I was glad that I wasn't the only one.
Yeah, and that amp, the Varsity's only 15 watts, but I have not heard, and you have to tell me how loud your 15 is, but this thing was so loud. I was like, because I had a 15 watt amp, I had a Vox 15 watt amp, and it could not compete live with the band. But this thing, I'm sure.
Well, there might have been something wrong with it. Wattage is like the trick. This is very like difficult for people to understand because they see numbers and they get, they think like, oh, 30 watts is twice as loud as 15 watts. And it's actually not true.
Mm-hmm.
Like 100 watts is only tiny little incrementally bit louder than 15 watts. Because it scales in factors of 10. So like to get twice as loud as 15 watts, you get like 150 watts. Man. And that's only like 2 or 3 decibels louder.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, it's not like it's the same with like horsepower in a car. It's like you can have a car that's got like 100 horsepower and a car with like 300 horsepower and it goes like a little bit faster, right? Like it's like, what are those Bugattis that go like 200 miles an hour? Like how many horsepower do they need to go like twice as fast as you're like whatever you're driving, So it's the same kind of thing. It's like the power has to be factored by 10. So like you're at Princeton, that's like 12 watts, and like a deluxe reverb that's like 22, which is probably really 20 or 18. They're like pretty much the same volume.
Mm-hmm.
But what the different thing about them is the headroom level.
Mm-hmm.
So like steel players like love a Fender Twin, which is a great amp for steel guitar. It's 100 watts, tons of headroom. They'll be on a gig and the guitar player is playing his Princeton reverb and they're like, I can't hear myself. Like you're blowing my head off with your Princeton, because the guitar player is like, I don't care about headroom. I'm just like cranking this thing and it feels great. And I have like a compressed sound. And when you're trying, so yeah, that's for me. When I think about like wattages and stuff like that, I'm thinking more of like how much clean can you get out of it versus like how loud is it? Because even my like little 5-watt mini head thing is like just ridiculously loud.
Dang. What makes it so punchy though? What makes an amp like immediate, like punchy and responsive? Because that's like the thing.
The power supply.
Okay.
It's all about the power supply, man. Like capacity, like quality of components, capacitors, like the stuff I use these like F&T caps, which come from Germany, these guys. And like, I've tried a bunch of different brands and they don't have that punchiness. So I don't know what is in the Magnetone, if they're using those caps or what, or something similar, but like little things like that, like make a difference. Quality of transformers, amount of current, voltage, how high the voltage is. Like the Milkman stuff is like higher voltage than Fender amps by like 25% or something.
Wow.
And part of that's because I'm trying to like get as much headroom out of these things as possible.
Was Jerry Garcia, wasn't he playing through like 150 watt amp? Like, didn't he have?
Yeah, the Macintosh. Power amp.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I thought I remember.
And those are like crazy, like ultra linear, or like weird, clean amps.
Yeah. It's funny because like the jam band thing, I think the first boutique amp I ever knew about was from watching Chuck Garvey from Mo play through that Bruno amp.
Oh yeah.
I think that was the first time I was like, what is that? I've never seen
that. Yeah, and Al was like the vintage guy. He had all the vintage, like he's the only person I've ever seen that had a Fender Vibratone, like the Leslie speaker.
Yeah, dude, that band, it's still, I mean, they're still doing, they just released a new record, but yeah, I remember. Really? Yeah. Tim, we have a whole conversation outside of this we have to talk about,
need to,
my
like,
friend.
Part of me, my ears are still in like 1998. Like you gotta, or whenever Sky Blue Sky came out, like 2003 or something. Like, yeah.
That's fine. I mean, you're a busy dude. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't always busy though. I used to just sit in the back of a tour bus, like listening to music and whatever. Like,
That's great. Well, I mean, it's interesting because that amp, that Bruno amp, the first time I saw that, and I was like, "What is that?" It was weird about it too. Is it was a 310 amp. It was the speaker
Oh
cabinet
yeah,
was 310s, and I was like, "What's that all about?"
yeah. That's like the
Because
Fender Vibro King is like that.
yeah, because the Gary Clark Jr. was playing through those for a while, and I remember seeing that. I'm like, "Oh, that's a 3 speaker amp. There you go."
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so
When you
interesting,
just
man.
can't quite lift a 4x10 basement, you need like 3 speakers or a super or
Yeah.
something.
I'm always just happy with 112, man. There's something about just 112 that I like. I had a 212 Mesa Boogie closed cabinet when I was in a touring band, and we were,
I
because
had
it
that
was just,
speaker cabinet in the 90s.
it was
And then I
great,
got the
man.
112 version, and I was like, where's this been my whole life? This is even
Yeah,
better. The
I know.
closed back 112 Mesa with like a, I don't know what speaker was in there. Yeah, probably like a vintage 30 or something.
Yeah. I mean, they just, I don't know. 112 for me is enough, I guess.
Yeah, me too.
I
I
just
mean,
love
for
it.
me, like a good, like super efficient speaker, like a JBL D120, like that's that's it. Maybe that's me like easing back into my Garcia thing again, you know. Well, like you
What's
just
in the what's in the creamer and what's in the I can't remember what's in the 15.
so for all my combos, I use Jupiter speakers.
Oh, right.
This guy Chris Young in Ohio, like just design. He's like kind of got one foot in the hi-fi world, and he started making guitar stuff maybe like 8 or 9 years ago. Mostly through like the capacitors and other stuff he makes. And then he started making speakers, and he sent me one to try. And I was like, oh, dude, this is like, I haven't found anything that's like this as even remotely sensitive as a JBL, except for his. So I've just been kind of using them the whole time.
Man, that's
But
cool.
I also use Celestion, and I use Eminence like for other things too. But like most of the time, I steer people towards the Jupiters, like either the ceramic or the Alnico,
Okay.
because
That's
it's like so the sensitivity is just there.
right. So if I ordered like the creamer or something, would you have like like specific suggestions for me? Like you should, if you're playing this type of music, like if you're doing blues, funk, soul stuff, a lot of slide guitar, would you be like, nah, maybe try this speaker? Is that how you kind of do it
Yeah,
with your
I would just
business?
kind of the question I would ask you would be like, what are you gonna like be pushing the amp? Or are you gonna be keeping it mostly clean? Because the creamer has that like kind of deluxe like Tweed Deluxe style phase inverter, which when you break it up, like it's kind of ratty sounding and not super smooth, like a
Mm-hmm.
deluxe reverb would be, for example, with the long tail pair. So if you're going to be cranking the amp, I usually recommend Alnico because it kind of like rounds the edges a little bit.
Mm.
But the ceramic is just like super fidelity, like that speaker with like a P90 in the neck position, just like plugged straight in with like some reverb and tremolo is just like a heavenly experience. you know, like
That's
it's
so
just
great.
you can hear like your thoughts like out of the. That's how much fidelity there is.
That's so great, dude. All right, well, you ready? I don't want to take up more of your time. You ready to do this lightning round get down with me?
Yeah,
All right. So, Tim, got some
there's a timer going.
suspense going here with the 105 BPM on my trusty metronome. So you can, if you want, so these the questions, I'm going to rattle them off. You can explain your answers. I love hearing explanations of why you answered that way. If you want, you don't have to. You can just burn right through it. Light fuse, run away, right?
Okay.
First question is always the same. Lennon or McCartney?
Neither. Mark Sandman.
All right. All right. Brown or blackface?
I guess brown
Okay.
for the trim.
Funnel cake or cotton candy?
Oh, funnel cake.
Simpsons or Futurama?
Simpsons. My wife, when she was a kid, her parents wouldn't allow her to watch The Simpsons, and I grew up, in like the '90s or whatever. So like, all I know is The Simpsons. It's like a trouble. The only part of our marriage that needs, work is her Simpsons reference, like recognition skill. I'm like, this happened on The Simpsons. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. We weren't allowed to watch it.
Dude, all that stuff's on Disney Plus now. It's pretty amazing.
I know. I mean, now we have a kid. She's not going to sit down and watch all these Simpsons episodes.
That's true.
Maybe when Jacob's like old enough, we can get into it with him, and
Oh man,
he'll watch The Simpsons.
Oh god, that's so good. Well, since you're a transplant, this might not make as much sense, but Athletics or Giants?
Giants.
Okay.
But really Red Sox, because that's kind of like a New England thing.
Yeah, I hear you. Naps, are they needed or are they overrated?
For me, no. But for my 2-year-old child, if you don't do it, it's a nightmare situation. So I think if you need a nap, you better take it. But
All right.
also, for an adult, like just drink some coffee and get off the couch because you'll
Get
snap
things
out of it.
done, man. Yeah, let's get things done. Scuba or snorkel?
Oh, neither. Can't do
Neither?
it.
Really?
Yeah,
You
I
don't
hate
like
it.
don't like breathing underwater?
No, for some reason I can't do it. I
Really?
tried. Well, also like the mustache and stuff, like water. Yeah, last time I was in Hawaii, or not maybe not the last time I was in Hawaii, but a couple times ago, we rented snorkel gear, and my wife's like, "Let's go!" And I got in the water, and I was like, "I just can't do it." Like, alone on the beach and watch you have fun
Oh man,
and get sunburned.
when I did my scuba certification, you have to pair off with someone and you have to practice like dropping your regulator and getting it. And the woman I was in the water with totally lost her shit. Like could not.
It's scary.
Yeah, it's if you're not used to. I mean, I love water, so it's like for me it's not a big deal. But like, yeah, for some people, man, it's like I don't like the sensation of breathing air on while I'm underwater. I can understand that.
Yeah, exactly.
X-Men or Fantastic Four?
X-Men, I think.
Okay.
Wasn't super into comic books, but
yeah, I'm a nerd. Look at my wall behind me. I mean, it's all Pop Funko Marvel characters. Class A, Class AB.
Is it like actual Class A, or is it someone saying it's Class A and it's actually still Class AB?
Actual.
I think I'm a Class AB guy because I like headroom, but my amps that are Class A are way more fun to play with a guitar.
All right.
Class A, when it's good, is real good.
Agreed. Last one. Okay, sometimes this is the hardest one. Sometimes this is the easiest one. This is a would you rather question.
Okay.
Would you rather be able to speak to animals or be able to speak every language?
I've spoken to animals, but that's a different thing. That's a whole different. We'll save that for Duncan Trussell.
We're talking Dr. Doolittle, so you can.
I think I'd rather honestly like. People have not like done a good job these past couple of years. Like I feel like I'm gonna like get down in a conversation. Like animals have something to teach us. People like I'm sure like the people whose language I don't speak or have the same things to say as the people whose language I do. So I'm going animal.
I would agree.
Do a better job, people. We're letting ourselves down here.
Yeah, right. Now Tim just wants to talk to animals, guys. Come on, let's be better. Let's be better. All right. Well, you made it through, buddy. Thank you so much for doing this. And yeah, guys, you need to check out all the guitar players there's tons of guitar players on my channel. But you should all check out Tim's stuff because it's gorgeous to look at. If you're on a stage and people see you with his amps, they're gonna be like, ooh, what's that? But they sound immense. And it's probably about time for me to start looking into getting one of your magical creations because I've been looking at them for probably 5 years.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, every year something comes up, man. Your water system goes up from your well or whatever. I'm like, dude, every time. Like that's what it's like owning a home. So it happens. You never have money.
Yeah. But I wouldn't know. I live in San Francisco. You can't own a home here.
Yep, that's why we moved. Like we were in Boston when we had our daughter, we were like, dude, we can't afford to live in Boston. Like, like daycare and whatnot. Like, so we moved back to where our family's from in Baltimore.
This is where we segue out of guitar and into dads complaining about the price of things podcast or whatever.
It's true, man. It's true. There's like validity to all that stuff, dude. So anyway, though, but you guys check out, what's the Milkman website? Give them that.
It's just milkmansound.com.
And the t-shirts are rad too. Like I was gonna buy a t-shirt today. I was on there like right before.
I'll send you a t-shirt.
Yeah, I love the t-shirt. Like your logo is so great, man. It's just like everything is marketed so well. It's great.
Thanks. It's my buddy Max who made that for me.
Oh, nice. Yeah, they're great.
It was supposed to look like an old like top from like milk bottle from yesteryear.
Oh, dude, it's super dope. Everything, the website's great. It's so easy to navigate. And you know what's cool? What I will say this before we end about your website that I really like is like some ink companies for some reason they won't list prices.
It's a thing.
Why would you do that? Like that's a barrier.
Because people complain about it. That's all people do on the internet.
I'm just like, I want to know how much
I
stuff
stopped talking about prices on like Instagram and Facebook because I just can't deal with the comments about it or whatever. It's like, of course it's expensive, guys. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'd love to hand build you something like lovingly and have it be $500, like to compete with something made in a factory and put in a shipping container and sent over here. Right. You know, but it's just like, it can't be done.
No. How many people are on your team now? Like, because it's only
just me, and I have my buddy Chris helps out, like kind of the past year he wasn't around. He was kind of like, we called him my night elf because he would come in at night and we'd kind of do a switch shift thing. But it's just the two of us, and then John, who like handles like the amp pedals and stuff like that, and kind of is like reminds me every 2 weeks, like, hey, you know, we should order more of these because, you know, this thing is happening here and it takes this long. So yeah, so he's definitely on the team. So it's really just three of us, but all the like stuff that looks like this behind me that's just me, like hand wiring all that stuff.
Yeah. So you guys know when you're getting, you know, his amps, it's like, it's just.
Yep. Yeah. There's probably a beard hair or something like in there. Like.
That's so great. Well, that's cool though. I mean, that's what people are paying for. You guys need to realize, like,
for beard hair in there.
Yeah, you're paying for the beard hair. You're paying for the time, the sweat that goes into making this stuff, which is glorious, man. So thank you so much, Tim, for making the time. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. And then for those that are in here right now, or those who are watching this tomorrow, Matt Schofield's going to be on Saturday morning, so I'm super pumped to talk to Matt. And we'll see you guys next time. Take care of each other. Take care of yourself. See ya.